Who are the best special forces in the world? Here's the list in no particular order. Number 12, Alpha Group, Russia. Alpha Group was launched back in 1974 as a counterterrorism unit during the era of the Soviet Union. This special unit survived the collapse of the Soviet Union and currently operates under the Federal Security Service of Russia, which is the successor to the KGB. Since its inception, Alpha Group's main objectives have expanded a great deal. Basically, they now do everything and anything from intel collection to carrying out secret operations domestically and internationally. Although little is known about the exact nature of its primary directives, most people in the know say that the unit is authorized to act under the direct control of Russia's top political leadership. Yeah, Putin definitely controls these guys. The Alpha Group has an international reputation as a vicious but effective counter-terror unit. The group's involvement in a 1985 hostage situation in Lebanon earned them their ruthless reputation. The rumors are that members of the Alpha Group began to take on tactics as bad as the kidnappers, such as taking hostages of the family members of the people holding the hostages. Number 11, Snow Leopard Commando Unit, China. The official name for this special force from China is 3rd Group, 13th Detachment People's Armed Police Beijing General Corps, so it makes sense why they have an official nickname. Before their latest name, the unit was referred to as Snow Wolf, a reference to the Arctic wolves for their endurance in the harshest of conditions. The Snow Leopard Commando Unit was quietly established in 2002. They trained in secrecy in areas such as riot control, counterterrorism, bomb disposal, and anti-hijacking. Since then, the unit has been deployed in different parts of the world, such as Russia in anti-terror operations. They've also been in Iraq and Afghanistan to offer protection to Chinese emissaries. To join the elite unit, potential candidates must have served in the People's Armed Police for at least a year. Once they apply, there's the non-stop physical and psychological tests before being accepted into training. Then there's even more tests. The soldiers who are chosen learn to handle themselves in all sorts of situations. They're taught to drive any type of vehicle, handle a range of weapons, dispose of explosives, and of course, learn hand-to-hand combat. Number 10, Special Naval Warfare Force, Spain. This Spanish special unit was formed pretty recently, especially when compared to most other special forces. It was created in 2009 after the merging of several Spanish Navy units, namely the Special Operations Unit, the Special Combat Divers Unit, and the Special Explosive Diffusers Unit. That means this unit is composed largely of Marines, but make no mistake, the unit is just as effective on land as it is in the water. Their duties, aside from counterterrorism, include reconnaissance, evacuation of hostages, and general military assistance. Being such a fairly new unit, they don't have many publicly known missions, but they have been a part of major operations across the world, such as operations in Lebanon, Somalia, and Haiti. They recently just had a short scuffle with Somali pirates who abducted a Spanish fishing vessel back in 2019. They managed to capture 2 of the pirates, but the ship remained under captivity for over 47 days before it was finally released. Number 9, GROM, Poland. This special unit was formed just back in 1990 to help with the safety of the emigration of Jewish people from the Soviet Union into Israel. GROM is a Polish acronym that roughly translates to Group for Operational Maneuvering Response. The unit was named in honor of the Silent Unseen, Poland's special operations unit during World War II. On the other hand, GROM also means thunder in Polish. That's pretty fitting for a highly trained special operations force, don't you think? Besides the usual counterterrorism defense, the unit is also well trained in the medical field, and their combat operations have been termed as surgical. This has given the unit yet another name, the Surgeons. Candidates applying to serve in GROM have to pass the typical series of physical and psychological durability tests. But the most famous test candidates have to go through is called a truth test. It sounds a little intimidating, but what it really means is that these tests are designed to show the truth about a soldier. This so-called truth test comes on the last day of the selection process. On that day, the candidates are in a series of field tests on an obstacle course that's miles long. Except the candidates don't know exactly how far they have to go to finish. Instructors are at different checkpoints actively giving discouragement of, "You're not going to make it, there's no point in going further," or simply just, give up. Apparently, there is no set distance, and it's all on the candidate. Number 8. Navy SEALs, United States. Navy SEALs are perhaps some of the most well-known special forces around the world. It makes sense since they've been involved in some of the most high-profile takedowns, such as the secret mission to find Osama bin Laden. It's no surprise that most elite special forces around the world take a few training tips from Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs were established in 1962. Navy SEALs essentially stand for Navy, Sea, Air, and Land teams. They have various responsibilities to get anything done for the U.S., such as capturing or eliminating high-profile targets and gathering intelligence. Besides their high-level operations, SEALs are also known for their grueling exercises that see the vast majority of recruits quitting. And these exercises start even before the main SEAL training kicks off. To qualify for the famous basic underwater demolition training, candidates have to first pass the physical screening tests. It consists of a 500-yard swim in 12.5 minutes, 50 push-ups in 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, 10 pull-ups in 2 minutes, and a 1.5-mile run in under 10.5 minutes. Candidates who excel at this stage become eligible for the main SEAL training, and that can take up to a year. Then there's the last week, famously known as Hell Week, where there's very little sleep and there's, let's just call it, plenty of intense activity. Number 7. Special Services Group, Pakistan. Black Storks is the other popular name for Pakistan's Special Service Group because of their distinctive headgear. They were formed back in 1956 and they're still active today. As a special operations force, the SSG is tasked with carrying out 5 main objectives: counterterrorism operations, foreign internal defense, unconventional warfare, direct action, and reconnaissance. The Black Storks do also take part in search and rescue and peacekeeping, just as examples. Their training ranks high up among the world's special forces as far as physical exertion is concerned. Recruits have to go through a 25-week commando course and during extreme physical conditions and train in hand-to-hand combat. For example, recruits have to be able to complete a 36-mile march in 12 hours in full gear. Oh yeah, then there's the ability of running 5 miles in 50 minutes in full gear too. The toughness of the physical training is a big reason why only 10 to 15% of the recruits make the final cut. Number 6. Delta Force, United States. Delta Force is another household name as far as the world's elite forces are concerned. Officially known as the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, this unit was created in the 1970s to counter terrorism. The vast majority of Delta Force's missions are classified, but a few do find their way to the public. For example, there was Operation Red Dawn that led to the capture of Saddam Hussein. Most soldiers in the Delta Force unit are usually trained servicemen drawn from the Navy, Air Force, Army Rangers, and Green Berets. As far as getting in, do we really need to say it's tough? Former Delta Force instructor Paul Howe talked about the high dropout rate. He said that out of the 2 classes he led of 120 applicants each, only 12 to 14 candidates made it through. Eric Haney's book, Inside Delta Force, described the physical requirements in detail. Standard tests include things such as the usual push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, but then there are the inverted crawls and swimming 100 meters fully clothed. There's also the all-night navigation courses. Apparently, it starts with going 18 miles while carrying 40 pounds of gear. Those 40 pounds, as well as the distance of the courses, go up each time candidates do it. The time allowed to finish the course also goes down each time. By the end, the distance is 40 miles with 45 pounds of gear. This is known as the long walk. Number 5. SAYERET MATKAL, Israel. Israel's most elite special unit is the SAYERET MATKAL, or simply just the unit. It's been in operation since 1957. SAYERET in this case translates to Special Reconnaissance, which pretty much sums up the main purpose of this unit, and that's to collect intelligence. But that doesn't mean it can't neutralize other situations. The unit is highly trained in and tasked with any hostage rescue and counterterrorism needs. Having said all that, the extent of SAYERET MATKAL's ability is, of course, under wraps. The unit's existence was not officially made to the public until the 1980s, but high-profile operations by the unit are well known now. For example, Operation Thunderbolt was back in 1976 when the unit was called in to rescue a hijacked Air France plane that was traveling from Paris to Tel Aviv. So, how does someone get in? The recruitment process takes place twice a year and consists of an endurance camp with several sleepless days. Only those soldiers that pull through are taken into training for yet another round of endurance activities and general combat training. So, do doctors and psychologists need to be called in for this? The answer is yes. They're consistently watching to make sure the soldiers can actually survive. Number 4. Special Air Service, United Kingdom. British Special Air Service was founded in 1941, and it's gone on to establish itself as one of the best elite forces in the world. Its functions have evolved beyond the battlefield over time. Much like other special forces, the SAS is a counterterrorism unit. At least that's what's known about this special force. However, the British government doesn't divulge much information about any special forces either because of the sensitivity of the information. Just like all of the other UK special forces, the SAS recruits only from the armed forces. And as with any elite unit, the recruitment process is a tough and draining physical test that sees most of the potential candidates drop out. Out of approximately 200 candidates that join the selection process twice a year, roughly around 30 people make it to the end. And we say people because in 2018, the recruitment policy changed to allow women to become members of the SAS for the first time. The toughest stage of training is known as endurance. This is where candidates march for 40 miles with luggage. And after they finish, they get the fun task of climbing up and down a mountain that's almost 3,000 feet high. Did we say endurance was the hardest part? Because we take that back, it's not. It has to be the resistance to interrogation test. This is where candidates have to last for 36 hours where they're really put to the test in all sorts of ways we're not going to describe here. Number 3. Nighthawks, Taiwan. The Taiwanese Nighthawks is another special force that's super secretive. Neither the training nor the qualifications are known, but that's a good thing for its members. The name Nighthawk was inspired by the highly secretive nature of the unit and their characteristic black uniforms. Their core objectives are varied. They include pretty much anything you can think of, such as providing security to top officials and foreign envoys, and any sort of military. The unit has been around since 1978 and regularly trains together with the U.S. Green Berets. And because they have training from the U.S., there have also been reports of the Nighthawks training in unnamed Middle Eastern countries' troops in anti-terrorist tactics. The Nighthawks bring a certain kind of honor to Taiwan since it's one of the few countries in Asia with special forces training capabilities. Number 2. Joint Task Force 2, Canada. The Canadian Joint Task Force 2 was created in 1993 to fill up the role of a new counterterrorism unit. This was after a team called the Special Emergency Response Team was disbanded. JTF2 is called the jewel in the crown of Canada's special forces. They're Canada's insurance policy when local police forces can't take on any emergency situations. JTF2 has done missions abroad in places such as the Balkans and Rwanda. Its members protect the Canadian Prime Minister and other high-profile individuals when they visit hotspots around the world. Despite being formed in only the early 90s, Joint Task Force 2 is the oldest and most skilled of Canada's Special Forces units. What makes JTF2 good is their training. The missions are demanding, and the intensity in the training is much more demanding. Basically, when they're not on a mission, they're training. Number 1. Jaeger Corps, Denmark. The Jaeger Corps is one of 2 premier special forces units of the Danish Armed Forces. The other is the Frogmen Corps. They were formed back in 1957 based on the UK's Royal Marines. The Jaeger Corps was created later in 1961, but its origins trace all the way back to 1785. Modern-day members of the Jaeger Corps go through a rigorous training and selection process. Fewer than 400 soldiers have been selected to serve in the small but agile force during the last 50 years. Once a year, soldiers from all over Denmark try out. The pre-courses train the potential candidates in land navigation, swimming, and basic shooting techniques. Throughout the pre-course phase, everything gets more difficult. Following pre-phase, the 8-week patrol course uses training events to assess candidates. They're asked to perform different scenarios that can happen in real life without any notice. Not surprisingly, 60% of candidates don't make it past this portion. Successful candidates then attend another 8-week course where they get trained in different military disciplines. Only around 10% of candidates who try out make it through. Here are some of the world's most advanced military weapons. Number 10. Tsunami Generator. When we think of weapons and destruction, we think of things that go boom, or shoot bullets, or take down aircraft, or disable enemy troops. But what about a weapon that can take out a city with a tidal wave? Tsunamis are extremely dangerous and powerful by just harnessing the energy of monster waves. Russia is developing a super torpedo that's capable of generating 300-foot monster tidal waves to threaten major coastal cities. Called the Poseidon, this 80-foot nuclear-powered submersible robot would detonate offshore from a major city and destroy that city with a tsunami. The top-secret project, codenamed Status 6 by Russia and Canyon by NATO, was for years the subject of rumor and skepticism. But by 2016, Pentagon reports confirmed the torpedo's existence, and in March 2018, Russia publicly unveiled a 3D animated video showing Poseidon attacking a city and a carrier task force. Real-life footage of a Poseidon being launched was released as well. To carry the Poseidon tsunami torpedo, Russia has built an experimental diesel-electric hybrid submarine with a small nuclear reactor on board to charge its batteries. Does that mean it can stay submerged for years at a time? Number 9. Unmanned tanks. Unmanned vehicles are getting more attention in militaries all around the world. One day, soldiers probably won't ever need to go outside. For years now, we've seen the success of what's officially called unmanned aerial vehicles. These are drones that can fly anywhere in the world while the pilot remains safe in a flight center someplace far away. This technology has now been applied to armored vehicles. The Black Knight unmanned combat vehicle is a 9.5-ton prototype that was first tested all the way back in 2007. Based on the Bradley fighting vehicle frame, it maneuvered well in exercises alongside the Bradley fighting vehicle, getting into position and collecting reconnaissance, then reporting back to the base vehicle. This type of breakthrough vehicle allowed for the collection of valuable information without placing soldiers in vulnerable positions. Fast forward to 2020, and the world still doesn't use unmanned tanks, but instead, there are now several more options. For example, there's the Ripsaw M5 robotic combat vehicle that's lightweight enough for all kinds of conditions. However, it seems like unmanned vehicles are still a long ways off. Why? What's the holdup? Humans are still far better than their robotic counterparts at performing even the most basic functions, such as navigating around obstacles or interpreting the surrounding environment. Apparently, flying in the air is much easier than navigating on the ground. Number 8. HYPERSONIC. Can you imagine robot insects controlled by humans? The Hybrid Insect Micro-Electromechanical System, or HYPERSONIC, is exactly just that. It's also known as the SAYERET program. It's a developing technology that's trying to be able to control insects by integrating them with chips and circuitry. This technology would provide a big edge in spying, of course. Imagine a SAYERET flying into a combat zone and getting arm's length from a target, transmitting images and data back to the base. The operation is focused on integrating a chip into insect larvae. This technology takes advantage of the natural biological processes of transformation and rapid healing. Basically, the system would be integrated holistically into the organism, making it a true cyborg and not just an insect with a camera glued to its back. Theoretically, when the larva undergoes metamorphosis, the chip would integrate into its nervous system in such a manner that signals can be transmitted to the circuit and the insect's behavior could be controlled. Obviously, this isn't in use now, but this is something that most likely can happen one day in the future. If this integration can happen in insects, what else is possible? Sounds unbelievable? Too weird to be true? Well, researchers at Cornell University demonstrated the successful implementation of electronic probes into tobacco hornworms in the pupal stage. The system can be used for surveillance of enemy interests, or even used by governments in order to monitor their own citizens. Number 7. ADS underwater gun. The ADS amphibious rifle is like something out of a James Bond flick. It's as simple as it sounds. It's an assault rifle capable of firing underwater. It's a relatively new addition to the Russian military arsenal, as they've had it in service since 2013. Previously, Russian naval commandos had to rely on the one rifle in the water and the traditional Kalashnikov on land. Now with the ADS amphibious rifle, they can just use one weapon for both scenarios. The underwater rifle comes equipped with a 40mm grenade launcher, which has a range of 400 meters. Oh, okay, grenade launching underwater too, because why not? ADS has a firing rate of 700 rounds per minute, with a range on land of 500 meters. The weapon's effective underwater firing range depends on the depth. For example, the range is 25 meters at a depth of 5 meters and 18 meters at a depth of 20 meters, and soldiers have to use a specially designed cartridge. Number 6. EXACTO. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, developed a self-steering guided bullet. It's designed for snipers in order to support long-distance accuracy under unfavorable conditions. Yeah, sniping is a tough job. The Extreme Accuracy Tasked Ordnance, or EXACTO, is like a tiny smart missile. It's essentially a smart bullet. This ammo can zero in on targets and even alter its course in mid-flight to compensate for target movement or changes in wind speed. This is a high-tech bullet that can find the target and adjust after leaving the barrel of the rifle. This means that even someone like you or me can have pinpoint accuracy. So how does it work? EXACTO contains a photodiode in the tip of each bullet to track a laser beam. It also has small fins on the bullet to help steer them through the air. The craziest part? It's fired from a special smooth rifle barrel. So that means the bullet doesn't spin in flight. It uses real-time optical guidance just like smart bombs. The system tracks targets and guides the bullet in flight, ensuring high accuracy regardless of weather or target movement. DARPA's performance tests of EXACTO demonstrated how the bullet not only followed moving targets, but managed to track and hit accelerating targets. Number 5. PHASR. We can't not have the PHASR in this video, because of how viral it got on the internet back in the day. The name and appearance of PHASR, or the Personal Halting and Stimulation Response Rifle, looks like it came out of a Hollywood movie that's designed to disintegrate aliens. However, despite its looks, it's a non-lethal device designed to temporarily disorient and blind intended targets. The PHASR rifle is a prototype non-lethal laser dazzler developed by the U.S. Department of Defense. It was developed at Kirtland Air Force Base as part of the Air Force Research Laboratory Directed Energy Directorate in New Mexico. This rifle doesn't fire bullets or disintegrate enemy combatants. Instead, it fires a low-intensity laser. The PHASR incorporates 2 low-power diode lasers, one visible and one infrared. So why does the government officially call it a dazzler? Well, the laser light temporarily distracts or dazzles the target person without blinding them. Number 4. Laser Weapons System. No list of high-tech, super sophisticated military weapons would be complete without a high-powered laser ray cannon, right? The Boeing Laser Avenger is an infrared laser system designed to be mounted to a Humvee. The laser is equipped with 10 kilowatts of power to shoot down drones in mid-flight. Lasers operate on line of sight, and of course, the challenge is to find the object and get it into the line of sight for the extremely straight and narrow beam. In order to accomplish this incredibly difficult feat, Boeing had to create a complex tracking system that could detect and track a very small drone moving at low or mid altitude. Basically, the laser burns right through any drone it targets. Unlike anti-aircraft systems, the laser has no muzzle flare and produces no smoke. This means it can be fired from concealed locations and would be extremely difficult to detect, adding another layer of protection for any troops using it. Number 3. Hypersonic missiles. Hypersonic. That means faster than the speed of sound. Hypersonic missiles can fly faster than the speed of sound. This is a major new area in the global arms race. China, Russia, and the US are all working on their hypersonic missile systems. The incredible speeds these missiles can reach, together with the altitude at which they fly, make them much harder to detect. At a speed of Mach 5, or 5 times the speed of sound, a hypersonic weapon is flying at least a mile per second. Since the 90s, the American Air Force Research Laboratory has been exploring and testing hypersonic propulsion systems. The result is the Boeing X-51 Wave Rider, capable of flying at 3,300 miles per hour. It's still in testing, but the X-51 has shown plenty of promise. Hypersonic weapons are one of the most prolific threats in the ever-evolving landscape of sophisticated military weapons. If there are going to be hypersonic missiles, then there needs to be a defense against hypersonic weapons. Raytheon Missiles and Defense is working with the US government and private industry to develop approaches for detecting, tracking, and defending against modern hypersonic weapons. Number 2. Anti-drone guns. Anti-drone guns are all the rage these days because drones are flying all around us. Drone Shield's drone gun is a straightforward anti-drone gun. It's basically a plug-and-play rifle-style weapon that can be operated by one person, and it's effective against a wide range of drones. However, contrary to popular belief, these anti-drone guns don't destroy the drones. Instead, these sophisticated weapons preserve drones. The drone gun jammer causes a drone to either perform a vertical controlled landing or return to its starting point. Why wouldn't someone just destroy the drone? Well, it would definitely help in an investigation to identify the government or individuals associated with the drone. The jammer technology also stops any video transmission by the drone. In 2019, Drone Shield released a single-hand model, the Drone Gun MK3. This single handheld pistol-style device delivers the same frequency jamming pulse of electromagnetic noise to disrupt a drone's RF signal. It also terminates its video transmission and sends the drone into safe recovery mode. Number 1. ZUMWALT class stealth destroyers. The latest arrival to the naval fleet looks like it was created in Minecraft. But even though it looks like a crazy toy submarine, the ZUMWALT class stealth destroyer is a breakthrough battleship with sophisticated stealth technology. The low radar cross-section and a wave-piercing hull, combined with a range of other top-secret technologies, make this destroyer almost undetectable by enemy radar. Needless to say, there's a bunch of other state-of-the-art technology on this ship that would take hours to get into. The research and development for the ship cost a total of $9.6 billion. The ship finally was delivered this year after almost 15 years of development. Here are some of the strangest military weapons ever developed. Number 10. Quantum Stealth. An invisibility cloak in real life? Maybe. Blending in with the environment completely makes sense, but how about staying completely invisible in plain sight? Since 2012, a Canadian company has been working with the US and Canadian militaries in developing an invisibility cloak. The material is known as Quantum Stealth. This cloak makes anything behind it sort of disappear. It works well enough that the military wants in on this action. How does it work? Well, it's quite complicated. Basically, it's tiny mirrors arranged in very specific ways. The lenses in this material are arranged so that they create blind spots, which is directly behind this material. Whatever is behind it can't be seen. But once you get further away from the material, you can be seen. This is how the background can be seen through the material and creates the illusion of invisibility. Hey, do us a quick favor and hit that thumbs up button. Number 9. Who Me Gun. For the Who Me Gun, the end goal was to strictly cause discomfort in a strangely hilarious way. Developed sometime during World War II, the HU-ME gun was made small enough to fit in a pocket. It contained a smelly sulfur-based solution that was supposed to be sprayed into the pockets of enemy soldiers. The intention here was to humiliate the enemies for being smelly around them, and that was supposed to negatively impact morale for the enemies. Yeah, the US abandoned this project just 2 weeks in for good reasons. Spraying the solution affected not only the target, but also the person spraying the troops. And with that, getting found out was pretty easy since all the enemy troops had to do was follow the smell. It was also rather useless to carry something that only sprayed a smelly substance. Anyone is going to put up with a bad smell when their lives are on the line. Then there's the whole thing of smelly smells not really affecting morale at all. Number 8, Pain Ray. The Pain Ray is exactly what it sounds like. Not all military weapons have to end a life. Some are just for ensuring a perceived enemy stays at a safe distance. So how does this thing work? The Pain Ray sends a beam of short wavelength rays at the target. Think of it as a microwave, except much more intense. The ray basically instantly heats up the skin. The rays cause a sharp pain that's effective in sending away aggressors without injury in less than 5 seconds. But of course, if someone actually can withstand the pain, it can cause serious burns. It was in development between 2002 and 2007 and ordered by the Department of Defense. It was first deployed in Afghanistan in 2010, but was later recalled without being used. Despite having 2 of these bad boys, the US has refrained from using them in armed conflicts around the world. In 2020, there were reports that some federal officials had considered their use to control protesters that had gathered outside the White House. Number 7, Guardian XO. The Guardian XO exoskeleton is basically an Iron Man suit in real life. So how exactly does Guardian XO work? The exoskeleton is largely designed for lifting heavy objects. It basically allows someone to lift objects that humans just can't lift. It can allow someone to lift things that are too heavy for even 2 people. According to the manufacturer, the exoskeleton increases the wearer's strength by a factor of 20, so it makes it easy for someone to lift as much as 200 pounds without breaking a sweat. However, it really depends on the application, so there are different types of suits for different needs. And getting into it is pretty easy, as it takes just about 30 seconds supposedly. That's because it attaches at 3 places: the feet, the waist, and the shoulders. And this suit isn't limited to just military use. It can also be used in industrial settings as well. Think of how this would help out some people in an Amazon warehouse. Number 6, ICEBERG aircraft carrier. Military weapons have been manufactured using metals for the longest time. In 1942, desperate times almost gave birth to a new material. German forces were hard on the British Isles and had completely cut off their food and military supplies. What was the solution? A plan was hatched to make an aircraft carrier that would take the war to the Germans in the mid-Atlantic gap that they were exploiting. Instead of metal, the new warship was to have something called picrate as the main material. This stuff was a mix of ice and wood pulp. With picrate, the aircraft carrier would have been largely resistant to German attacks. Although this wasn't ever something actually completely developed, it's still really interesting it ever was considered viable. This endeavor was called the HAWKEYE project, and Winston Churchill approved it in 1943. But the flaws became apparent as soon as the construction began. Keeping the massive structure frozen would have required a complex cooling system, something that hadn't been factored in initially. That meant it would have cost at least twice the initial projection. Additionally, an insane amount of pulp would have had to be gobbled up in the project, thus affecting the pulp and paper industry at the time. Number 5, corner shot pistol. The corner shot pistol totally makes sense, right? It allows that someone to not only look, but also shoot around corners without having to expose themselves. While it was developed in the early 2000s by the Israelis, the concept isn't new. The Germans during the Second World War had rifles made up of a periscope and a curved barrel extension known as the Krummlauf. The improvisation failed because it was impractical and because the barrel quickly wore out. The corner shot pistol is far more advanced and much more effective. This front end consists of a camera, laser, a flashlight, and a trigger, all linked to the other end. The camera transmits what's happening around the corner to a small screen on the operator side. What if you just want to shoot something right ahead? All it takes is the flip of a switch. Number 4, gyrojet weapons. The unique GYROJET gun was developed in the 1960s, but their use didn't quite catch on. Instead of using bullets, GYROJET firearms use small rocket projectiles known as microjets. Unlike bullets that leave the barrel at maximum speed, the microjets are slow at first and they reach maximum speed at a distance of around 30 feet. Because of the low starting velocity, this meant these guns didn't need a super strong barrel, nor was there much recoil. So GYROJET firearms are very light compared to the average gun at the time. However, the advantages didn't outweigh the disadvantages. During testing, most versions of it were slow-loading, inaccurate, and failed to fire on several occasions. Today, they're no longer in production, but they're still owned by collectors. To fire off a single round can cost over $100. Number 3. CUJO Robotic Dog. As you can tell from the name, CUJO is a dog. Well, a robotic dog. It's a 4-legged carrier designed to relieve soldiers of much of whatever they needed to carry. These robotic dogs could carry around 400 pounds of weight and operate in almost every combat condition imaginable. This robot, disguised as a dog, had been in development for 5 years, but it does have a few dog-like qualities. For starters, it can follow a soldier out in the field. It was programmed to detect obstacles in its path and find a different route around them. And in case it fell over, it could get back up on its own. And even if it somehow got flipped over, its general structure made it easy for a soldier to flip it back up. During its unveiling in Hawaii, CUJO showed off its capabilities to replenish soldier supplies, especially in terrain that proved difficult to reach with normal vehicles. Unfortunately for CUJO, it doesn't look like he'll be a military guy's best friend just yet. Reasons for non-adoption included loud noises from the carrier and difficulties in repairing it when it broke down. Number 2. Vomit Beam. The vomit beam is exactly what it sounds like. A beam that would make you puke. It's actually more like a flashlight than an actual gun. But unlike the flashlight, it randomly emits different colored light beams that are very bright and appear in rapid succession. To our human brain, that's just too much to handle. The constant change of frequency causes pressure on the brain, and all that leads to temporary blindness, headaches, nausea, disorientation, and ultimately, vomiting. The purpose is to incapacitate someone without long-term injuries and make arresting someone that much easier. The first prototype was built back in 2007. By 2010, vomit guns were to be available to the police, National Guard, and Border Patrol. However, it's still not in use in the US. The Russians, on the other hand, seem to be all in on this thing. In 2019, they went a notch higher by getting a bigger and more advanced version called the 5P42 fill-in. The non-lethal weapon has pretty much the same effects as the vomit gun. The difference is that it's used on a much bigger scale. And besides the disorientation and puking effects it induces, the fill-in can also impair night vision technology, sensors, and anti-tank missile rangefinders. Number 1. Sticky Grenade. The very first grenades as we know them today were developed in the early 20th century. Fast forward to World War II, and grenades got a slight modification, one that made them sticky. It's not exactly advanced, the surface was just made sticky. To deploy it, soldiers would pull the pin from a grenade to activate it. From that point, it was just a matter of attaching to enemy tanks and watching as they blew up. However, they didn't work the way they wanted to. A major flaw of these grenades was their failure to stick to tanks when they were dirty. But they would somehow stick to soldiers' uniforms really well. That's definitely not a scenario any soldier would want to be in. The grenades had to be abandoned, but not before 2.5 million of them were used worldwide. Just what exactly happens at Cobra Gold? What survival skills do the soldiers learn? Cobra Gold traditions. What is Cobra Gold? Well, it's currently the largest Indo-Pacific multinational military exercise held in Thailand every year. Cobra Gold was first held back in 1982, and when it first started, the military training exercises were held in order to improve relations between the United States and Thailand. Now fast forward to 2020, and there are now over 27 nations participating. Cobra Gold nowadays is designed to improve participating nations' capability to plan and conduct combined and joint operations. They're specifically trying to improve how their militaries work together over a range of activities, such as enhancing maritime security and responding to large-scale natural disasters. However, most nations participate in Cobra Gold as observers rather than participants. If you've actually participated or know someone that has, definitely let us know what the experience is like in the comment section. 2020 Cobra Gold exercises. Soldiers from different nations go through different military exercises each year. Not all years are created equal, it seems. For example, in 2020 for Cobra Gold 20, they introduced a new landmine reduction operation. Basically, Thailand and the US were working together to clear landmines that are still in the ground around Thailand. 2020 Cobra Gold exercises had the participation of the Marine Corps' F-35B Lightning II fighter jet and high-mobility artillery rocket systems. It's a lot like getting new toys for the different soldiers. The F-35B fighter jets brought next-generation, well, everything. It's one of the most advanced fighter jets ever. Cobra Gold 20 also featured a cyberspace field training exercise for the second year in a row. This is actually kind of cool, because it's basically a giant war game, except online. 6 nations came together to patrol and defend their own information networks. This exercise was done to develop strategies for operating in today's modern information environment. But Cobra Gold isn't just always war games. They also focused on humanitarian civic action projects. Throughout Cobra Gold 20, different nations assisted in engineering programs at various sites in Thailand. The event brought the militaries and the locals together as they worked to develop new facilities and curriculums at local schools to replace infrastructure that's grown too old or just has been non-existent. Real action. Although Cobra Gold may just seem all fun and games, there's still a very real element of danger. All the events and 2 weeks of training culminates with the final exercise, which is the Combined Arms Live Fire exercise. This exercise is designed to maintain readiness and increase the capability of all the partner nations. For Cobra Gold 20, the US and Royal Thai Armed Forces worked together once again as they were put through various simulated situations. Situations simulated in Cobra Gold have real-life implications. Remember when 12 boys who were part of a soccer team were trapped in a cave back in 2018? Cobra Gold partner nations came to the rescue when they sent experienced divers to assist in making sure the boys got out safely. Cobra Gold Survival. But what the most controversial and probably most interesting exercises are the survival skills. Being an elite soldier and performing top-secret missions means being stuck in the middle of nowhere is a very real possibility. So Cobra Gold wants to make sure the soldiers from each nation understand special survival tactics. For Cobra Gold 18 as an example, one team of Marines made their way through a dense and humid jungle. The last of their rations and water were all gone. In this simulation, there's no opportunity to resupply for several days. Thirst and hunger started to kick in. The mission still needs to continue. And in a real-life situation, these Marines will because they've had jungle survival training. Korean and US Marines learned jungle survival training from the Royal Thai Marines in Cobra Gold 18. Survival in the jungle is an important skill for all troops to learn because soldiers can't exactly pick what environment to do their missions. Royal Thai Marines showed their partner Marines how to survive and thrive in a hot and dangerous environment. Their course taught troops how to find water sources, start fires, and learn about the differences in edible and non-edible vegetation. The worst part? They also had to learn about dangerous animals and insects, both venomous and non-venomous, that are native to Thailand. They had to learn which ones were okay to eat. Marines were given the opportunity to try some of the fruits, vegetables, herbs, insects, and animals that were found in the jungle. They were shown how to safely catch and handle both venomous and non-venomous animals. This included geckos, tarantulas, and scorpions. And yes, soldiers had the chance to eat all of them. The interesting part about eating a tarantula? You have to defang them first. Also, even though scorpions are venomous, it's actually safe to eat their stingers with the venom as long as you heat them up. And what if you're thirsty? In nature, cobra blood is one of the best ways to stay hydrated. Snakes can provide soldiers with both food and water they need. And of course, the soldiers were given the opportunity to try out the COBRA. According to one Marine, it tastes like blood with a hint of fish. Ew. PETA pains. Of course, not everyone is thrilled with this sort of survival training. PETA isn't thrilled one bit with real snakes being used. PETA says the photos that show Marines swallowing scorpions and guzzling cobra blood are more reminiscent of a frat party gone wrong than a military drill. They want to take the exercise out of cobra blood and instead make sure the troops know cutting-edge technology-based survival training. Well, it's true, the troops should know cutting-edge technology-based survival. But the problem is, technology-based stuff doesn't exactly grow in the jungle. It's understandable why the exercises exist, right? In no real order, here are a few of the coolest and most expensive military weapons ever built. Find out which program costs over $1 trillion. Number 10. V-22 Osprey. The Osprey is a plane that has its own special, unmistakable look. This $72 million plane was designed to take off and land like a helicopter, but also fly as fast and have as much range as an airplane. The total cost of the Osprey program has been roughly $35.6 billion. It's the first tilt-rotor aircraft to enter full production, and it's been one of the most innovative and controversial aircraft because of the notoriety of the accidents it had at the beginning. People just didn't think these things were safe. The Osprey is capable of short takeoffs and landings, as well as vertical takeoffs and landings. With these capabilities, it means that it's able to operate in a wide variety of environments. Here's an interesting fact. LEGO actually made a version of the Osprey. The mode was supposed to have been released in August of 2020, but LEGO pulled the Osprey set. Why? It's because LEGO has had a long-standing policy not to create sets that feature real military vehicles. But some smaller retailers did receive their orders early. Lucky buyers have been quick to scoop up the rare sets. eBay listings for the V-22 are selling for well over $1,000. Do us a quick favor and hit that like button. Number 9. B-2 Stealth Bomber. The B-2 stealth bomber was first in flight back in 1989. More than 3 decades later, this bomber still looks futuristic. The average cost of the 21 B-2 bombers in existence came to a whopping $2.1 billion apiece. The entire program cost taxpayers $44.75 billion. Adjusted for inflation, that's $72.47 billion today. Just to fly this bomber costs up to $135,000 per flight hour to operate back in 2010. Because of how expensive it was, the project was controversial for the government. The near end of the Cold War in the late 80s dramatically reduced the need for these machines. The B-2 stealth bomber was designed with the intention of getting into Soviet airspace completely undetected. So Congress actually slashed plans to buy 132 bombers down to 21. Today, 20 B-2s are still in service. That's until... Number 8. B-21 Stealth Bomber comes along in the mid-2020s. The cost for each of these new bombers is a much more reasonable projected $564 million. At first glance, the B-21 looks very much like the B-2 already, and there's a good reason for that. The team that designed the B-2s nailed the design when they came up with it in the 80s. They would have gotten it even closer to the B-21's design if the demand for low-altitude flying wasn't requested so far along in the B-2's design process. The decision to add low-level flying capability came out of fears that Russia would have used increasingly more advanced radars that would quickly make the B-2 obsolete. Much about the B-21 still remains unknown, and it's not clear when we can get an actual real look. The Air Force expects to fly the B-21 for the first time in late 2021. Number 7. P-8 Poseidon. Boeing developed the P-8 Poseidon specifically for the U.S. Navy at a program cost of $33 billion. When the Poseidon was first developed, it was intended to be a surveillance plane. That's why, when it was built, it had the latest sensors available, and that's still true today as they're still produced and serviced. but with surveillance also means weapons. This bad boy has the ability to drop things such as mines, missiles, and torpedoes as well, because why not? If you saw something that needed to be, let's call it taken care of, why not take care of it right there? It actually was outfitted with so many weapons during its initial design, it had to get its wings redesigned in order to support all that extra weight. It's still in service today, and it's still flying around doing some spying. The incremental cost for each of these planes is around $125 million now. Number 6. OSHKOSH Light Combat Tactical All-Terrain Vehicle. This OSHKOSH is going to be the new vehicle to replace the old Humvee. OSHKOSH won the initial $6.7 billion government contract to produce these vehicles. The per unit cost for one of these bad boys is relatively low, starting at only $250 grand. But the projected total cost of the program can easily get beyond $40, $50, or even $60 billion total. It's about time the military got some new vehicles. The first made Humvees weren't really designed as combat vehicles. They offered little protection to the soldiers, so the military hurriedly ordered armor upgrades that were just slapped onto existing Humvees. But all that extra weight ruined the Humvee's valuable off-road capabilities. It's easy to make a vehicle that's small and fast, but with limited protective capabilities. It's easy to make a vehicle that's big and slow, but keeps everyone really safe. It's really hard to do both. Taking big truck capabilities and putting them in a smaller, faster, more maneuverable vehicle was the goal. And this time, the Army wasn't going to hurry anyone. Number 5. F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. How much does it cost for the Joint Strike Fighter program? The projected life cycle cost of this program is almost $1.2 trillion. The program cost is the most expensive project ever put together by the military. At one point, the program was $163 billion over budget and 7 years behind schedule. To put things into perspective, the program cost U.S. taxpayers about twice as much as sending a man to the moon. The advanced airframe, propulsion system, and stealth features of the F-35 makes it more lethal than other aircraft. Military officials say these fighter jets are unlike any others and provide the U.S. invaluable advantages over countries such as Russia and China. It doesn't take a military genius to know that a supersonic jet that can fly undetected by radar for hundreds of miles will make a difference anywhere in the world. Is this plane worth the money? Let us know what you think in the comments. Number 4. HMS Astute. For $2 billion, the British Royal Navy got a state-of-the-art attack submarine. It was quieter than any of its predecessors, with the ability to remain undetected in almost all circumstances, despite being 50% bigger than any other attack submarine they had. The HMS Astute was built with the latest nuclear power technology. That means this submarine never needs to be refueled, ever. It can also get around the world completely submerged without ever coming up because it manufactures its own oxygen for the crew. The HMS Astute just recently celebrated its 10th anniversary in service, despite a shaky start. The issues included flooding during a routine dive that led to an emergency surfacing. There were problems with corrosion, even though the boat was essentially new. There was also concern over the instruments not being able to monitor the nuclear reactor because the wrong type of lead was installed. However, after all these issues, and then some more that popped up, were corrected, in its years of service since, it's been smooth sailings. Number 3. Le Terrible. France's nuclear submarine Le Terrible cost 3.1 billion euros back in 2010. France maintains a fleet of nuclear-armed submarines and strike planes and has about 300 operational nuclear warheads, so it makes sense they invested that much in Le Terrible. Le Terrible was the first of France's submarines equipped with the M51 missile. The M51 cost $6.7 billion to develop and can carry anywhere from 6 to 10 independently targetable nuclear warheads. That means that these warheads can defeat ballistic missile defense systems. Each warhead is capable of independent maneuvers. The French Navy is the only one in the world with this missile. However, France's nuclear arsenal wasn't designed to win a nuclear arms race. They have enough just not to lose. Number 2. E-2 Hawkeye. This interesting looking plane was first deployed all the way back in 1964 and it's still operational today. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's cheap. For the latest and most advanced version, called the E2D Advanced Hawkeye, its per unit cost is $246 million. Different variants of this Hawkeye have been in continuous production since 1960. This gives the E2 Hawkeye the distinction of having the longest production run of any carrier-based aircraft. The key element on this plane is its radar, which is housed in the super obvious 24-foot rotating dome. The E2 has been commonly referred to as the Hummer because of the distinctive sounds of its turboprop engines. Number 1. Trident II Missile. How much does a missile with the power of 8 atomic bombs cost? Try $30.9 million per missile. So far, the program has cost over a combined $55 billion over the years. Each Trident missile has a range of up to 7,500 miles and is accurate to within a few feet. The Trident II consists of 3 solid-fuel rocket motors that ignite in sequence in order to propel the rocket forward. It's a ballistic missile that's designed to be launched from an attack submarine at speeds of up to 13,000 miles per hour. Obviously, it's never actually been deployed for real use. Thankfully, it's only been used in testing. Trident II missiles are in both the US Navy and the British Royal Navy. Hopefully, it'll never be used because it's armed with nuclear warheads. At one point, a conventional version was proposed, but that never went through because most sensors have difficulties distinguishing a nuclear ballistic missile from a conventional ballistic missile. Here's what's next.